Whether they put us up against another company or not, we still attack it as if we are working with them for the first time. And I think they see that, they realize the passion that we bring. And
it's also just like careful what you wish for, right? All your life, you want to do a certain type of project. And when you finally get that opportunity, like, boy, you better be ready for it.
All right, Jeremy and Danny, first question I want to ask you is about perception being, I just looked this up, 23 years old, which, first of all, mazel tov. I mean, it's really hard to do that. And I've seen a lot of studios that seem like they're going to be around forever, and then something happens and they're just gone. And I have a little bit of experience running a studio, not the size that you guys are, but it's really hard to to maintain that longevity. And so I want to know what you've seen change in the studio business over those 23 years. Neither one of you can start.
I'll jump in. You know, for us, it has been a very, very long time, 23 years, and we've seen a lot of changes in the industry. And one of the, I think, things that has kept us going is just being adaptable and willing to evolve with changing times. What we began doing in 2001 was motion graphics for television, mainly. All of our clients are broadcast networks like HBO, ESPN, Showtime, you name the network. We probably did a project with them at some point along the way. And then we did a lot of work with ad agencies doing commercials and marketing campaigns. And then slowly but surely, we started to migrate into feature films around 2008, 9, 10 with the Marvel work, and I'm sure we'll get into that deeper. And then from there, we started to move into the technology world, which is where we are today, doing technology and film. So there's just been this constant evolution over the 23 years, and I think that's one of the most important qualities for us in staying alive and staying afloat is just being willing to move and adapt. And, you know, we always had this saying, it's the, you know, the Wayne Gretzky line, skate to where the puck is going. Right. And, you know, unfortunately over these many years, we've seen a lot of studios kind of fixed in their ways or set in their ways and just kind of continuing to pursue one type of work or the type of work that they know and that they do, and just when that work starts to, I guess, fade or slow down, there's nothing else. So, you know, we kind of see things shifting. I mean, I'm not saying that we have like psychic abilities. I mean, in hindsight, sometimes it looks pretty smart.
Always does.
But, you know, we just kind of get opportunities and we'll start going towards those opportunities. So, yeah, we've seen a lot of studios over the years who are doing motion graphics for television, not around anymore. So just kind of continuously reinventing ourselves and figuring out, you know, where our expertise needs to lie.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit in terms of the types of clients that you work with, because you mentioned that you started off doing sort of traditional motion graphic stuff, I'm assuming for, you know, all the broadcast networks. I've worked with most of them too. But what I found, at least in my few short years running my studio, was that there's a kind of a big difference between like the work you're doing and the way you do that work for like a broadcast network versus an ad agency. And in Boston, where I was living, they're almost two completely separate industries. And I'm curious if you felt like that was an example of that. Like, you know, you have this one client base, and then you see over here, there's also advertising. And advertisers, you know, ad agencies tend to have a little bit more variety in the types of things they ask you to do. It's not just video or animation. Sometimes it's assets for, you know, a website or something like that. So even back then, were you kind of thinking in that way, like Wayne Gretzky?
Yeah, I think we always had the mentality of trying to find something that we could specialize in, right? So, you know, we were we were a motion graphics studio. We worked with anybody and everybody. And if they were like, hey, it'd be great if we had some live action, we'd be like, oh yeah, we could do that. We could shoot it. You know, we could do. So, but then after a while, I mean, every studio on the planet was doing what we were doing. So for us, it was just trying to focus in on, you know, what do we enjoy doing and what can we be passionate about? And then how can we spread that passion amongst the team? And just be specialized in a specific, you know, not necessarily genre, but just a specific, I don't know if it's even style, but what we realized was that, you know, Jeremy and I are huge Marvel fanatics, and we kind of, you know, that rubbed off on a lot of the team, although some came with already being Marvel fanatics. And we realized that, you know, when we were creating the technology for the Marvel characters, that we enjoyed it and we were good at it. You know, we didn't just do the cool tech to make it cool and blue, we actually did a lot of research and just did our homework and created those elements. And then by chance, you know, we did that for, well, the first movie was Iron Man 2, but, you know, we kept doing it through other movies. But by chance, a technology, or we'll call it, I guess, a past client from Singapore reached out to us and saw the movie and loved the tech and how it was designed, and asked us to design what they were creating, a specific product, and to design it as if Tony Stark designed it. So, you know, we told them, like, you know, we're not developers. You know, we're just designers. And he said, I don't care. I have a great engineering team. I just need, you know, great UX and UI. And that kind of became our path and our roadmap. And slowly but surely, we just left agencies behind because, you know, we were getting agency work, but there was always triple bid. And, you know, a lot of the times we traveled around the country and did these like luncheons where we would spend a fortune, you know, getting all these people in a room, and then all those people in the room were never the people that made decisions, you know, to hire us. They were just, you know, PAs or whatever it was, which was fine. It was great meeting people. But at the same time, like I just came from New York and I'm in, like, you know, Minnesota meeting all, you know, a couple of agencies, and wasn't really worth it because we weren't getting a lot of the work. So we decided to focus and specialize. And I think when people say, you know, I need surgery in my brain, they don't go to a heart surgeon. They go right to the brain surgeon. It sounds silly, but at the same time, you know, I think people, when they see what we do, they're like, that's exactly what I need, and that's who I need.
I think too, one of the aspects that, you know, Danny and I are both very keen about is just watching the market, watching the economy, and really paying very close attention to the signs that are all around you if you're paying attention to them. You know, we've survived a lot of down cycles. You know, in 08, 09, you know, the great financial crisis and the recession and the housing bust and all that stuff was going on right at the time where we were starting to work in the feature film world. And that was a period where all of these broadcast clients of ours were starting to ask us to pitch on projects that we never had to pitch on, or budgets were getting slashed. I mean, literally every day we're reading about this agency letting go of this many people, and layoffs were just piling up. I think Danny had a wall, actually. We were cutting out articles and like pinning them up because it was out of control. And again, just like watching this all kind of unfold around us, saying, well, I don't think we should be pursuing, you know, ad agency work or broadcast work. You know, let these other studios go after that. It seems to be a big problem right now. So let's enjoy this ride into the feature films. And then obviously that led to so much else. But it's really just watching that stuff and paying attention to it, not thinking at all that we're somehow insulated from it. You know, even in the last couple of years, we've often like seen like headlines and in the news, in the business news world, and I would send stuff to Danny saying, it's incredible. We were just talking about like this a week ago about, you know, employment and salaries and things like that. And then I'm seeing, you know, headlines on CNBC about it. It's as if we're like a little microcosm of the economy, you know, and we're always paying attention to that stuff.
Has there been any shift? I mean, it sounds like you already brought up the fact that, you know, you noticed in the past, a client would come to you, they'd book you, you'd do the work, and all of a sudden you have to now pitch against, you know, 3 to 5, maybe more other studios. Were there other changes that you noticed in the relationship over the last 2 decades between clients and studios, you know, as the number of studios increases and the power that an individual freelancer has to produce work on their own increases? People, you know, clients are bringing studios in-house and building their own internal teams. What are some of the other things that you've seen shift that, you know, they just don't work the same way today than they did back then?
For me, the biggest shift is we don't get to spend enough time with clients now, I think. You know, back, and this is even before COVID, you know, a lot of our clients are everywhere but in New York or New Jersey area. So, you know, a lot of the time we were doing like CineSync or Zooms before COVID. You know, they just didn't need to come to the studio, and a lot of our clients are repeat clients, so you know they're comfortable with the decisions we make and they trust us, so that's fine. But I just remember, and we were just talking about this, funny enough, Jeremy and I, a couple of days ago, where we would go out to lunch with our clients that would be hanging out at the studio from HBO to ESPN, you know, because we're working all day with them on different versions of the cut. You know, we had to do a 60-second, a 30-second, different logos at the end for Comcast, Verizon, you know, all these different things. And we would literally spend like weeks, and they'd be down there for, you know, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes, yeah, they were just camped out. You know, you always had to have a comfy couch, and a, you know, and
Starbucks
a TV
nearby.
yeah, Starbucks nearby, exactly. And then, and you know, a TV with like cable, so they could be watching, you know, some of their favorite shows while they're waiting for renders and stuff like that. So for me, I think that's was one of the biggest shifts, and one of the ones I missed the most, because I mean, we were so close with a lot of our clients in the beginning. A lot of them went to family events. You know, I remember a bunch of them being at Jeremy's wedding, you know, and now we're friendly, but it's just a different scenario, just a different feeling.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, similarly to clients in-house and having that sort of camaraderie and creative atmosphere, obviously the remote staff that so many studios have, I guess, turned to has also been, I think, a hit to that sort of creative studio atmosphere. You know, it's something that we're very, very precious about, and we're continuing to try to bring back people in-house, in studio, to have that amazing chemistry in person that you just can't get over a Zoom or video calls, or, you know, scheduling an hour tomorrow to brainstorm or to be innovative at 10 a.m. Like, it just doesn't work that way. It's got to be organic. It's got to be throughout the day, rubbing elbows with each other, looking at each other's screens, giving each other ideas, inspiring each other, being, you know, constructive with criticism with each other, but in person, and where you can actually read each other's body language and deliver it a lot better than looking at a camera on a screen. You know, that is certainly something that I think studios globally have had to adapt to, you know, and we still maintain a hybrid schedule with our team. We let people work from home Thursdays and Fridays, but we have mandated to be in the office Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I think, you know, at first that was like such a radical concept, you know, coming out of the pandemic, but everybody, I think, looks forward to those 3 days to be together, especially when we're in the midst of a creative challenge that you just want to like sketch with each other in the same room, and being able to just wheel your chair over to discuss what's on your screen, or maybe somebody's having a creative block and the whole team needs to look over their shoulders and give each other ideas. It's just a whole different type of dynamic. So that's a big shift. Just on the client side too, yeah, there has been a change in terms of clients building in-house teams. There's no doubt about it. That's become more prevalent in the big corporate brands that we work with. But, you know, as far as we're concerned, there's always going to be room for that outside perspective that a creative agency can bring. It's sort of like different set of eyes, different set of specialties, and I guess backgrounds that we bring to it. And I think that should never go away. I think a lot of the in-house teams have been built to be builders and executors versus, you know, what we always say is we want to be the strategists. We'll build it too, but come to us for the thinking and the strategy and the concepts. And then, yes, we would love to build it as well. But to just come to Perception or to a creative studio to be a builder or to just execute, that's really not our, I guess that's not our mission, right? We're always looking to get involved on the conceptual level.
Yeah, I think you just made a really good case for specializing too. I mean, back, 20 years ago when there was less companies doing this and less in-house, creative departments, it was very lucrative to, just, do versioning on a bunch of spots at the end of the day and just push the buttons in the right order. But now that's almost been commoditized. And so you do need to kind of find your niche. I want to dive into some of your work. So, I think probably the first time I heard about Perception was the Iron Man 2 titles, or not the titles, but the FUI stuff you guys did. Mm-hmm. And it really seemed like after that, I heard about you all the time. Maybe it's that effect where like you think about a red car and then you see red cars everywhere, but that was my perception of it. And my question is, from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, wow, they, probably worked for years and years to have the capabilities of getting that gig. And then they did an amazing job. And so now they're like, you're a made man, you're all set. And it, you know, since then, you know, Black Panther and Buzz Lightyear, and now you're doing this future tech stuff. What was it really like? Like, how big of an impact did that one job make on the trajectory of perception?
I mean, on the trajectory of perception, I mean, it was life-changing for the company.
Watershed moment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I see it as like, you know, being married, right? You're married, even though you're married, you still got to work on the relationship, right? You got to do stuff that sometimes you don't necessarily want to do, but you got to do it. And it's never like, you know, Marvel doesn't sit there and they get a project and they're like, oh yeah, you know, just call the perception guys, they'll take care of it, you know, and get the team going. We have to come up with original concepts each time. Whether whether they put us up against another company or not, we still attack it as if we are working with them for the first time. And I think they see that and they realize the passion that we bring. And, you know, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You know, we're Marvel fanatics. You know, growing up, I was a Wolverine fan. That's my favorite character. And we're just passionate about all the characters, and we know a lot of it. You know, people could do the research, but sometimes you don't know what you know when you're a true, like I guess, fan, or, you know. And I think again that shows in when we come up with the concepts and talk about these characters and build upon the narrative that they're trying to, you know, showcase in the movies. You know, the FUIs that we build and the technology we build, we try to make them as an extension of these specific characters. So Tony Stark's going to look like his because he's got tons of money and he's, you know, cool, and, you know, he does whatever he wants to do. And then there's, I guess, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D., this more military, more, you know, boxy looking, things like that. There's Thor's girlfriend, and she's still a genius, but she doesn't have the money, so she gets her, you know, her parts from Radio Shack and like tapes them together for her technology. So there's this kind of characteristics of each of the superheroes that we try to bring into the FUIs and their technology that they're showcasing.
So yeah, I mean, we never take the relationship for granted, ever. And like Danny said, we approach every project like it's our first project with them, and we always want to deliver, over-deliver, and just give them everything we got because of the love and the passion we do have for the brand. You know, going back to the beginning of Perception 23 years ago, it's interesting because it was really the dawn of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, predating Iron Man was X-Men. In 2000, the first X-Men movie with Hugh Jackman making his triumphant return this year as Wolverine. But that was 24 years ago. And then in 2002 was Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. And here we are coming up in 2001. And Danny and I are both seeing, you know, X-Men, and then the sequel to that's coming, and then Spider-Man, and the sequel to that's coming. And then there was a Hulk movie that was in pre-production, the first one, the Ang Lee disaster. Yep. With Eric Bana, and I'm a Hulk fanatic. Danny loves Wolverine. I'm a Hulk nut. And between all these movies coming out, even again predating Iron Man and the Avengers by many years, we were just dying to get in there. You know, we wanted to do. I mean, obviously, I wanted to do the titles for that Hulk movie very badly, and that just set a fire in us to get into Marvel anyway by any means necessary. Obviously didn't happen for all of those films, but we just never stopped trying. And I could probably do a whole podcast on how it ultimately happened, because there were a lot of like little moments that, like, if one thing didn't happen, none of this would have happened. Right. But it was, everything kind of lined up finally to give us the opportunity. And yeah, that opportunity came in 2009 with Iron Man 2, which came out in 2010. And from that point, yeah, we've gotten to work on almost every Marvel project since, whether it's a film or a show or their logo. We didn't get to do a title sequence until Avengers Age of Ultron, which was many years later, which was, funny enough, that was the original goal when trying to work with Marvel, was to do a title sequence. We had in 2001, no one knew what an FUI was.
Right.
It wasn't a thing at all. So when we got Iron Man 2, it still wasn't a thing really. I mean, there were people talking about interface designs in movies and a couple of great books on it. But we just took it on as a design challenge. You know, it was like a piece of design. How do we animate these phone screens and these holograms and so on? And we had no idea at the time that that would be like a portfolio piece for tech companies who were going to really be attracted to that, like moths to a flame. And oh my God, we got to call the company that's designing Tony Stark's gadgets because we want our product to have that cinematic quality to it, that sort of aspirational Tony Stark futuristic vision. So again, like, you know, we look back and like all the dots connect when you look backwards, but when you're there, you have no idea, you know, what's going to come out of this. Just kind of taking each and every opportunity that comes to us and trying to max it out as fully as possible, hoping that, you know, we'll just get another project from Marvel or get another chance. And truth be told, Iron Man 2 was not smooth. It was not easy. It was not stress-free. It was, I mean, Danny will want to jump in here, but it was intense. We were, you know, building the airplane on the way down as we're jumping off a cliff. And we had never attempted anything close to that scale. We were going to get it done. We were going to figure it out. We were going to get the right people, the right help. But it was months of not leaving the studio. I had just had my first kid. So I was going through a whole thing there. You know, that's always fun. But and I'll never forget having a call with, you know, the executive vice president of Marvel, who had no confidence we could finish the project. I still have nightmares about that phone call to this day. And I had to basically promise her that we weren't gonna let you down, and, you know, give us one more chance, because we were having a couple of technical issues at that point. Right. That was creating some doubts. So yeah, it was one of those moments, you know, we often talk about like being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and, you know, being in the pain zone is where you grow, right? And that was a perfect example of it, like just putting us all in the most uncomfortable position and creating the most amount of stress. And wow, what came out of that is hard to describe.
Were you guys, you obviously designed the fake UI and all the animation, everything. Did you also do the final composites, or did another vendor do that?
Yeah, we ended up doing the final composites. I mean, we brought people to like, it was painful. It was
so
painful.
much work. That's crazy.
Our creative at the time, our lead creative at the time, like just started smoking and was like smoking a pack a day. And we were drinking.
Jeremy, I'm surprised you still have your hair, man. Your first kid and Iron Man 2. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
like
barely holding on.
I don't even know if Monster Energy or any of those even existed back then. But
just
there was stronger stuff, Danny. Come on.
Yeah, we were mixing stuff from like GNC, some pre-gym workout stuff.
Yeah,
and
ephedrine was probably still legal.
It was still legal.
Then, so
yep, exactly.
Right. I mean, my head was tingling like nonstop, man.
Yeah,
I mean, we probably didn't leave the studio for like at least a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. Like no shower, no
Felt
nothing.
like months.
It was bad. It was bad.
It's a good story now, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's a great story now. Just when you're going through it, it's like being at the gym with, you know, with no AC or no windows being opened. It was bad.
Well, it was also a crash course in and again, we had almost 10 years of experience at that point working with broadcast clients and agency clients. This was on a whole other level of just like inspection and the way they would put every frame under the microscope and scrutinize every pixel, you know, especially with the compositing, when we're compositing, you know, somebody and like one hair follicle is off and you could see a green edge, send it back. Like, I think we had like 80, 90, 100 versions of some shots, literally, before they were approved. And we were working with, on Iron Man 2 was Yannick Sears, who's an just incredible, legendary VFX supervisor, Academy Award winner, I think, for The Matrix. So, you know, this was like a crash course. This was like going through boot camp in VFX perfection. And again, we just, you know, we're designing for televisions. We never looked at stuff on a IMAX screen or, you know, at that scale. And they're, you know, on the other end and in Burbank looking at these things in a screening room. We're looking at on a 20-inch Apple monitor, like, yeah, it looks fine to us, but it's a whole different world. So we got a crash course in all that stuff.
Yeah, and even where Jeremy and I both met at RGA when we did work on some films there, you had people that were more technical that would take care of the technical stuff, because there was a lot of people working there. When we were there, it was probably around 80 people. But at Perception, it was like, someone's got to figure out why the edges, and Jeremy would be like, Danny, that's your deal. You're a VFX guy. I'm the designer. Because it didn't blend as much as it does now, right? You meet designers now that can do awesome visual effects. Back then, it was more like, all right, Danny's a visual effects person, Jeremy is the designer, art director,
right?
So-and-so's an editor, and the other person's this. So it was a lot of figuring it out. And we did a lot of that at RGA too, but we did a lot of it at Perception. But it goes back to just, if you want to level up, you got to take on certain challenges that a lot of people will probably say, yeah, I'm going to pass on this one. Like, if someone told me like, you're going to play Michael Jordan tomorrow, I'd be like, any day, anytime, throw me in there. I know I'm not going to beat him, but man, I'm going to give him a run for his money. And that's, I think, just the mentality that Jeremy and I have, probably because we're both from New York, even though I'm from the better side in Queens and Brooklyn. but yeah, you just you're never going to learn how to get better unless you either put yourself in an uncomfortable position or you just gotta, like I said, you gotta level up.
It's also just like careful what you wish for, right? All your life you want to do a certain type of project, or you have a certain idea of the type of work you want to do, and when you finally get that opportunity, like, boy, you better be ready for it. And it's never going to come at the right time. It's always going to come like when you least expect it, or like on a Friday night, right before the weekend, and you have to like get started. Like, how many times, Danny, we have calls for like dream projects like Friday at 6 o'clock, and the client wanted to see ideas Monday morning. It's that's the way it is. It's never like, you get the call like, hey, yeah, in a few weeks we would like to see some ideas. It's like, can you guys have the bandwidth to do something for us this weekend? And it's that client we've been waiting like 3 years to work with.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it with Marvel. With the first thing for Iron Man too, it was like, can you guys do something, in the next day? Like, just drop what you're doing and like cancel your night, because this is it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and I'm going to ask a question that might get all of us in trouble.
Sure.
So there's sometimes, it's mostly on the internet, so I don't know if this is like a real life thing or just an internet thing, but there can be this sentiment that I see from some designers and people in the industry, and some who are really influential, where there's almost this combative like posture against that. Like, no, like, I know that like studios like to do that, and ad agencies love to do that too.
Yeah.
I've been there plenty with ad agencies. Yep. And if we all just stick together and say, no, we're not pitching for free, and we're not staying up late on Friday and working the weekend for you. No. But then where the rubber meets the road, I hear this constantly, from successful business owners like you guys, that sometimes that's just what it takes. And you either accept that or you can, fight it, but it's not going anywhere. I'm curious what you guys feel about
definitely
that.
A lot of thoughts on that. I mean, right out of the gates, we don't pitch for free. Okay. We used to. I will confess that for many years. I mean, we learned everything the hard way. We didn't know anything when we started. So we used to fall into that trap, and, if free ideas, call us, we'll give you free ideas. Like, that was it. And boy, oh boy, was that a bad business model. So yeah, we're in that camp for sure. Occasionally we still get calls if we want to pitch ideas or come up with ideas, and we will politely say no. We'll show you all our work. We'll talk about strategy, how we would approach your project. But if you want to see preliminary ideas or solutions to your project, that's our livelihood. You have to engage us fully. But as far as, taking on opportunities when they come, that's just about building a business. Maybe eventually, now we have enough cachet or pedigree where we can be a little bit more selective and choosy. But that takes a long time to build that. And you have to have a pretty strong business in order to be at that position. When we were, in our first decade, like, if the opportunity came, we'll move heaven and earth to make it happen, especially if it's a dream client or dream project. We'll figure it out. We'll find people. You know, I guess one of our superpowers is just being able to mine for great talent, you know, and find some amazing, you know, we've had some of the most talented and gifted artists in the world work for Perception at some point, which we're always, you know, so grateful for. But we have a good eye for it too. So we'll always try to find a great team. You know, when we always say, like, if just because one person can't do something doesn't mean it can't be done. So, you know, when we took on Iron Man 2 and many other projects, you know, we would talk to our team and they'd be like, we can't do this. We don't know how to do it. Okay, that's fair. But we can find people who do know how to do it. Just because one person can't do it doesn't mean the company can't do it. Like, the company has to be bigger than the skills of one or two people. So, you know, that's been a big driving force for us as well when we're looking for work, you know, because it's not always going to be the perfect project that is a perfect fit. If we want to grow, if we want to expand, we're going to have to push into different directions in new areas, which might mean finding different people to help fill in those gaps.
Yeah, I think also, you know, just from, again, like Jeremy said, you know, if you build up a cachet, maybe you could tell them, like, look, you know, it's a little bit short notice, whatever, we'll do it for next week. But back then, I mean, you know, my father owned a restaurant and he was never home on holidays. You know, if you want to build a successful business, there's a lot of sacrifice that you have to be willing to take. And you have to have, you know, luckily, Jeremy and I are married to partners that are very patient, I guess is a good word. But I think, you know, and I'll go back to my dad, you know, he always used to tell me this famous line that everybody wants a job, but not everybody really wants to work. And that's what me and Jeremy used to always do, is like we used to put the work in, whether it was at the gym, whether it was at, you know, for Perception. I mean, usually it was always at the gym to get us through Perception because we needed that firepower to get through the day. But, you know, we would, someone called on a Friday night saying, hey, we need something by Monday. I was like, yeah, no problem. We'll start like as soon as we get off the phone. Like, I'm not gonna, you know, the last thing I was worried about, and this is probably messed up to say if my wife hears this, but the last thing I was going to worry about was calling my wife saying, hey, I'm not going to make it home for dinner. You know, I just call and say, listen, it's a late night. I'll see you when I see you. And I might not be home for 3 days. And she knew that. So, you know, I think it just comes down to each person's individual work ethic.
Yeah.
You know, and how they're,
pain
you know,
tolerance?
people are brought up differently.
Right.
Yeah. People are brought up differently. And my dad is straight off the boat from Spain. So my pain tolerance is pretty high, because if I said one little thing wrong, I got like just smashed.
Yeah.
And that was fine back then. And that made me the person I am today. And I think that rubs off on my kids, because my kids are hustlers. So
I think it's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think that Danny and I came from a place where we met at RGA, R. Greenberg Associates, very, very famous digital agency in New York. And now they're in many cities, obviously. But when we were there, it was 100 people, and it was 5.5 years for me, about the same amount of time for Danny. Like, first real job in this industry, taught us both everything. And that place was a pressure cooker. And that place was, everywhere you look was talent. The whole place was filled with the best of the best. It was like, honestly felt like I was honored to be there, like that they picked me. Like, it was such a select kind of elite agency. It was the only place in New York doing title sequences in the 90s, that's for sure. And that's what I wanted to do coming out of college. But going there and just like seeing how everybody else was working, and the creative leads, and like that place, people worked like crazy. Weekends, late nights, it was part of the deal. If you want to work here, if you want to do this high level work on films, on commercials, this is not a 9-to-5 job. Like, it's kind of sad to say this, but when people would leave at like 5:30, you'd get a look. You know, you'd get a look, and somebody might make a crack like half day. And that's like literally the culture me and Danny came from. Not saying that that's the culture we wanted at Perception. You know, I kind of hated that, but it got into me, and it became part of like my work DNA. So I knew that in order to be successful, like it's going to take hard work from everybody, not just one person. Like, it's a team thing, but the team is only as strong as the weakest link, and everybody's got to put it in. Otherwise, you know, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah. I started my career in Boston, and this is also going to get me in trouble, but I'll ask you guys anyway. So I remember my first job was at a production company in Boston, and they did production and post. And again, that's kind of where I learned everything that I knew up till that point. And we would do these shoots, and I kept hearing from the directors around me and the producers that they would use East Coast and West Coast as a terminology. If you worked really, really hard, you were East Coast. If you took a 2-hour lunch and you checked out at 5 p.m., you were West Coast. And I guess the perception was that like it was a little softer on the West Coast, and you're both East Coasters, you know, Jersey boys. So I'm wondering if you've ever kind of run into that, you know, when you're hiring or you're working with clients on the West Coast, they have a different attitude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So let me correct you. I'm not a Jersey boy.
Okay.
I'm from New York. The studio's in Jersey, only because I can't sing. But definitely, I think a good story to tell is probably the first time we went down to LA to shoot something, and me and Jeremy were like, all right, we're gonna, we got the crew, we got everything set up. All right, we're gonna fly down like Saturday night, stay Sunday, and then Monday we're gonna start shooting. So, we go down, we meet, we just have like a pre-production call like that Saturday, whatever it is. And they're like, all right, so call time's going to be at like, 10:30. I'm like, wait, 10:30? Call time in Manhattan is like 7 a.m. and then you start at like 8, right? So that threw me a little bit. And then, when we were on set, stuff like that, it was like, there's a couple of people that were like running late or, messing up. It was just like, we're going to wait another little bit, see what happens, And I was just like, man, I don't know. I don't know if I could do this here every day. It was, it was like culture shock, But I mean, you get used to it because, number one, we're in LA, so, let's do it how they do it
here.
In
Rome, yeah,
exactly. But it was definitely, a little bit of a shock. Like, I guess they do things a little different out here, I mean, it's beautiful weather. It's like, why are we rushing? It's beautiful every day.
So hard? I get it.
There's no rain here. Like in New York, we're like, we got to shoot this because if it rains in an hour, like we're not going to be able to get this done. So yeah, it was different for sure.
Yeah, I can't wait to read the YouTube comments for this for this episode. All right, so let's start moving into the stuff you guys are doing now, and I want to try to connect it to the more traditional kind of linear work that you were known for, in the past, because one of the things that was always interesting to me about fake UI. And I think I've read interviews with you guys where you kind of address this. Like there's this perception that, well, because it's fake and it's not actually a real thing, you can kind of make it whatever you want as long as it looks cool and there's enough buttons on it. But, I noticed that the best fake UI looks like it could plausibly work. Like there actually is some sort of product designer behind the scenes designing a thing that could, if the technology exists, to work. And now you're working on actual UI. And, the world of UI and UX, it's always seemed somewhat separate from motion design to me. Up until maybe the last 3-4 years, it's really kind of connected. I think especially with new tools like Rive coming out that really do connect those two things. So I'm curious how you sort of looked at UI when you were doing the Iron Man 2, fake UI in 2008. How do you look at it now? Has that shifted at all?
Yeah, well, when we were working on Iron Man 2, like I said earlier, it was just a design challenge for us. We weren't even thinking about it as FUI or, user interface design or strategy as its own discipline. We were really just trying to solve this design challenge. They had recorded or filmed Robert Downey doing all of these gestures with a prop. In one case, it was a piece of glass for his phone. In another case, for the holograms, he's just miming in the air. And our assignment was to connect the dots between his gestures and what is actually on the screen and try to make sense of his nonsense. So with the phone, he's doing a lot of tapping in circles with his thumb, and we had to retrofit an interface that actually would hit at the right moments where he's tapping and where he's swiping and doing all these things. So that's a whole other different type of challenge. It wasn't like, okay, design an interface that allows someone to use their phone to hack into a presentation in a courtroom,
right?
Which is what the phone was used for. It was, we got to connect his gestures and we got to make it look cool. Obviously, it's got to look Tony Stark. And that was also a big part of it, is creating like the brand of what is Stark Tech. What does it look like? What does it feel like? We got a lot of great kind of cues from Jon Favreau and all the team at Marvel talking about the design of this phone needs to feel a little bit in the future, but not so far in the future that it's not believable. Like find that sweet spot, right? Like it's got to be like the iPhone of 10 years from now, not the iPhone of like 50 years from now. So, you know, we had some ideas early on that were way too far out there and we had to dial it back in. So, you know, that's a big part of it. And just figuring out how to use the interface to tell the story that needs to be told in that scene. When you think about it, in these films, there's actual moments, like sometimes there are long moments on the screen where the whole movie, the audience is only looking at a computer screen, or they're reading data, or they're watching some kind of like function or process happen on a device. So in a way, like our work, our interface is almost like a supporting cast member. Like we're holding the story for that beat. Like if we mess up or if we aren't clear with what is supposed to happen or what that story point is and we lose the audience, then we're kind of failing at the most fundamental level. So it's always, for us, comes back to the story. And I think in Iron Man 2, not only did we have the scenes, but we also had the script. So we were able to see, like, you know, what the screenwriter's intention was. And Tony is doing this, and he's then accesses this, and then this screen comes up, and okay, so there's a sequence of events that need to happen, and we need to hit the mark at a certain point in time that lines up with Robert Downey Jr.'s fingers and what's going on the other screen in the courtroom and so on. So there's a lot that goes into it from that storytelling level.
Yeah. So then, okay. So it sounds like at that point you weren't thinking like a UX UI designer. It was, you were kind of reverse engineering something that could plausibly be a UI. Yeah. Okay. But now, you know, I got kind of jumping ahead. I mean, there's a really cool project on your site for a Hummer electric vehicle. And you did all these concepts for what the dashboard looks like and all of that. And I learned this term, I think, earlier this year, human-machine interface. And so this is sort of, I guess, a term of art in that industry of, you know, it's basically interfaces that are mission critical. You cannot have too much latency. They can't break. There can't be a bug in the code. They have to just work. Right. Because other lives are at stake. And so it seems like the way you would approach the design of something like that has to be a little bit different than you would for a movie. So I'm curious sort of how you look at, you know, I mean, you can go to school and learn UX now, and that's not even UI. It's actually a separate thing. And I'm curious how you sort of approach integrating UX into UI, into motion design, because you're kind of combining all three. Before we get to that answer, I want to let you know about a brand new course we've launched for anyone looking to dive into the world of interactive animation. Rive Academy Volume 1 is the most thorough introduction to Rive out there, and in it, you'll go through the entire process of design, asset preparation, animation, and interaction design using Rive's state machine system. In the end, you'll even learn how to work with developers who will be implementing your beautiful interactions. You'll learn how to think about working in Rive, the different use cases for it, how it differs from Lottie, and so much more. We're thrilled about Rive, and Rive Academy Volume 1 is here to get you up to speed, and we've already started recording Volume 2, which will go even deeper. Find out more at the link in the description, and now let's get back to Danny and Jeremy.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, you know, the great collaboration with the client, as far as them dumping everything into our brain as to, you know, this is how it has to be done, this is what we've done in the past. You know, they have to be patient because they're working with luckily enough, before the Hummer EV, we worked with a bunch of car companies, so we were kind of already, you know, we knew what to expect. But, you know, it's just them trusting that we're going to understand what they need and then leave us alone for a little bit. And this is where the outside, you know, I guess perspective or the outside influence comes into play, because then we kind of push the envelope a little bit. Like, we know this might drive their engineers crazy and it might not work. And they probably say, no way, we're not doing it, but let's show it to them because it might, you know, spark something else or spark an idea for something different and maybe in a future vehicle. Who knows? But no, I mean, at that point, we have to get a UX person involved. You know, they have to go through, and a project manager is key, obviously, because if you saw the size of the Excel sheets that we got for the Hummer EV, as far as like the asset deliveries and things like that, it would make your mind melt. You know, you have to send everything, you know, organized in a way where their engineers just take it and drop it in. And then you have to do the same thing. So there's day mode and then there's night mode. So you have to do it twice. So, you know, if you're delivering 200 elements, it's really 400. But I think, you know, again, it just comes down to the team being passionate. You know, there's team members, you know, not only am I a Marvel fanatic, I'm also a car freak. So there's a lot, you know, there's some team members that are also car junkies. Jeremy loves cars as well. So there's just a level of knowledge also that we bring. You know, I can't take apart an engine and put it back together again, but I can rip a car around the track, and I've done it many times. So I know when someone's talking to me about, you know, G-forces or braking or whatever it might be, I think it just comes down to having, you know, just have the right team, and then being able to put that team specifically on whatever that design challenge is. And in this case, it's an HMI. I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but that's kind of how we put the team together for specific projects.
Yeah, I feel like I've asked this question to a few people, and I'm always hoping, okay, here comes the clean. It's just step 1, step 2, step 3, and of course it never works that way. It's always messy. I do have a question about, you know, these automotive projects, and you guys have done quite a few of them. And I'm guessing that the answer to this will be different in a year and in 2 years, but what is the platform that you're actually building for? You mentioned that you basically have to design things and then split all the assets apart and hand them to engineers. And I'm assuming you have to have some kind of really detailed instructions on this goes here and it brightens when this happens. And that sounds like the old way that motion designers used to work on UI for, like, you know, websites and digital products. You'd basically prototype it, and then you'd give all the pieces to an engineer, and they'd hopefully rebuild it just the way you intended.
Exactly.
And now there's more tools like Unreal and Rive where you can kind of close that gap, but only if the car is running Unreal Engine internally. And I have actually no idea what platforms you're actually building for. Yeah,
I mean, I won't name the actual car company, but we've done a lot of work for a specific car in Unreal. This is pretty recent. And, you know, they thought that they were going to be able to run Unreal in the vehicle. And then last minute, they realized, like, oh, okay, this isn't working out the way we thought. Our engineers are having trouble with it. So we had to go back and rebuild it in Kanzi, which is a whole different platform.
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, it's you don't have to learn it.
Don't Google it.
It's pretty limited. You can Google it.
You can Google it. It's limited. It's, you know, there's specific amount of layers you can have in it. Yeah. And it was for something that, you know, it was an animation, a 3D animation for when you change modes. So you're in sport mode, then it goes into wet mode, and then regular mode, drag race mode, whatever it might be. And we had done this beautiful, we'll call it animation, in Unreal. And it was just like, wow, this is going to be awesome. And then we had to rebuild it in this other thing. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping down the line that basically I personally can just open up Unreal, change what design the way I want to design it, and put it on whatever disk or, you know, drive, whatever it is, and put it in my car and be like, yeah, upload version 3 because, you know, I feel like I'm going to go driving today on the highway, but I want to do like $120. You know, eventually I'd love to be able to just customize my own vehicle's gauge cluster and things like that. But we're not at that point.
You're right though, Joey, about just kind of designing the prototype of what we want it to look like, how we want it to behave, how we want it to animate, and then working with the engineers on the other side to hopefully get it as close as possible to the original intention. I was just thinking about how in our past life, designing broadcast graphics, we got a little bit of a taste of that with real-time graphics that we got to do for sports and even for ABC News for the election in 2008. We designed their whole election graphics package that had to be basically fed with live data using a program called WizRT. And I remember we designed the way we wanted it to look in the animations, and then we had to go to ABC News and work with their WizRT team to, you know, animate these things, and everything was so linear, and we wanted things to have, like, you know, eases in and out, and it was a big challenge to get them to match that. And then many years later, we did the same thing for SNY, which is the Mets channel. We had designed all the graphics for them, and that was all live data, sports graphics using WizRT, and we actually brought our own WizRT person on the team thinking if we had it in house with us, we can be on this guy and make it perfect. But I think it's still similar with most of our car collaborations. It's kind of that handoff. You know, like Danny said, we have been doing a lot of Unreal with one car manufacturer, but on the whole, it's just building a kit of parts and a lot of prototypes.
Yeah. So there's another project on your site that I thought was really cool called Visualizing AI. And I don't know if that was for a client. You just can't say who it was.
You know,
or if that wasn't.
It's for a wide range of clients, and it's been something that we've been doing for years, and we realized we never really showed it. And nowadays it seems like it would be very, very relevant to kind of show all this work. You know, whether it was for a car company that wanted to visualize the in-car AI agent that you're interacting with, or in some other tech brands that we've worked on, an AI visualizer. So it was really, it's kind of just a case study in just that whole endeavor. Like, what does AI look like, you know, when you're interacting with it, you know, vocally? And we've been tasked with that from a number of different clients. So
that's really cool. So that leads into a question I had, which I guess it's really around marketing and sales of this service that you provide. So one of the things that, you know, I talk to a lot of freelancers, and even with traditional motion design, sometimes there's this problem of you have all of these potential clients out there, but they're not actually aware of what's possible and what cool things you could be doing that could be solving business problems. And so it helps to kind of put out experiments and do personal projects and just kind of put out work so that maybe someone sees that and goes, ah, I could see my brand fitting in there. And it sounds like that happened a little bit after, you know, the Iron Man work that you guys did. Like, actual technology companies saw that and said, "Oh, maybe our actual real products could look like that." But when you're doing something more esoteric, like, what does it look like when you're using a real-time AI voice interface? And I'm sure that, you know, the top companies, the OpenAIs and the Microsofts, they have people internally that think at that level already. And they know that that's something they need, and they might even, you know, have heard of you guys. But there's a million companies out there that are working on AI products, you know, and other technologies. And there's this need to communicate what they do visually. How do you, you know, is that AI project sort of like a sneaky marketing thing also? Is it also a way to get more clients and to show, okay, this is a thing we can do? You maybe didn't know you needed it, but now that you've seen it, you know that you do need this. I
think it's just, I mean, everything we put on our website is a sneaky marketing tool, right? I mean, we're trying to get more work, or else there's no paying the bills. So, but I think, you know, it was something that, I mean, for a while, it was probably like 4 or 5 projects in a row we got from automotive companies, and they were all asking us like, "Hey, we're creating this like AI concierge service inside the vehicle where you could ask them, you know, the car, like, hey, get me here, or, you know, I have to buy something. Where's the best place to get this for my wife, whatever." And it was crazy because we were just getting the same requests just from different car companies. And then we got a couple of requests from IBM to visualize their, oh, I forgot the name of it now. Debater, thank you. The debater that was on like Jeopardy or something like that, you know, going up against contestants. So it was just more about like, you know, AI is a buzzword, obviously. But it was more about, you know, we can't show one specific project because there were smaller projects, but we could show that we worked on a bunch of these different projects that, you know, that was more about visualizing AI. You know, is it sneaky marketing? Yeah, I guess it is. But at the same time, it's like you said, you know, or what's funny is that, you know, we started with Iron Man 2, then we got to work on technology, and now it's, you know, we're like, oh, you know, we're gonna market and tell everybody that we worked with, you know, this company and that tech company and this tech company, and if you look at our site, there's a lot of Marvel work and there's a lot of film work, you know, with UI and stuff like that. Then you go to the technology side, not as much, because we realized, or, you know, this is part of the, you know, the rules of engagement. So like, yeah, if you want to work with Apple, you can work with Apple. You're not gonna be able to show what you're doing with Apple or SpaceX or a lot of companies. I mean, the Hummer EV, we got super lucky because they were, you know, if you ask me, they were pretty smart. And it's like, let's just tell the world that we hired the team that designed Tony Stark's technology to help us with our HMI. I thought that was really smart, and I loved it because we got to, obviously, ride that wave. So yeah, I mean, it was just funny how we thought, we're going to work on one tech project, and then we're going to, advertise that, and then we're going to get like 5 more. But like we worked on one, and then we weren't allowed to talk about it. And then we worked on a second one, not allowed to talk about it. So it's very tricky to be able to publicize all the technology work. So it goes back to what you were saying as far as, freelancers or other companies putting out work that, that they think what an HMI should look like. Or, I've seen people putting out, watches and, all these different things, or a race car scene using Unreal, all these different kind of tests that people are putting out to showcase, like, I've done this, I can't show it, but this is pretty cool. And if somebody needs this out there, then, I'm here. So,
yeah, I think there's always been this mantra, you get what you got. And the type of work that you're going to get is the type of work you already have. So, back from day one, we were always thinking about doing some spec spots or coming up with experiments in areas that maybe we weren't getting the opportunities in, but we really wanted to get those opportunities. So, going back to our Marvel story, there is a part of that story that included us coming up with a Hulk design for a title sequence for the Hulk film, the second one, not the first one, the one with Ed Norton that came out right around the time Iron Man came out. And we did put together an idea, a concept for it. It's I don't think it's on our site, but it's probably been, we probably put it up on our socials at some point. Didn't get us the job, but it was kind of proving to Marvel that we can do a title sequence as good as anybody. And we've always done little experiments and nuggets like that, whether, these days it's, across our socials, but back in the olden days, put it on our reel, which was a DVD, or in our case, even VHS tapes. We were always trying to like drop in, like, all right, we wanted to do a car commercial back in the day. We've never done a car commercial. So we would fake one, like even a 5-second test to just put in a montage. Boom, there's a car. Because it was a while, our reel was all HBO and ESPN, and then it just kind of like would feed back to itself. That's all you're going to get. You're going to get these big broadcast projects, whether it's sports or like HBO type programming. And we're trying to, sell ourselves to other networks or other ad agencies that had nothing like that. So we had to create our own internal assignments to fill in those holes.
I love that. You get what you got. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just to go back to, the Iron Man 2 story, there's so many different, well, I guess small stories within the big story, but they had this huge wall that they wanted to do some sort of animation on. And at that point, we had already met with them a couple of times just to, we would literally be in LA or not be in LA and be like, hey, we're going to be there tomorrow. We'd love to come by and show you some ideas. So after a while, they knew us, but we didn't get to work with them just yet. And I remember, I think having the first call with them when they gave us this small opportunity on Iron Man 2 saying, hey, we have this thing. It's like kind of networky and you were the network guys, because we work on so many networks, right? But until we proved that we could do the FUI or Tony Stark's technology with a test that we did that they did not ask for, that's what opened up the doors for us. Not the video wall that we did a great job on, but it was the other stuff.
This is great advice. I always tell freelancers, you have to do what you want to get paid for before someone's paying you to do it. And you guys have demonstrated that on a much higher scale. Speaking of getting paid, I was curious, I think like if someone comes to you and they're like, I need a film title sequence, and you go through a pitch phase and they decide on a direction, at this point, you've got to be pretty good at estimating more or less with some padding, how long that's going to take, how much it's going to cost. Mm-hmm. But if someone comes to you with, something like this Hummer EV interface, which I'm assuming was much more of like an exploratory thing, at least initially, how do you approach bidding these things and figuring out how many people you're going to need and who you're going to need and how much you're going to charge? I think from a business standpoint, it's interesting because I think more and more studios are sort of looking at these outside the traditional motion design. Yeah,
it's definitely challenging. And what I will say, we didn't talk about this, but this is a big part of why the technology work for Danny and myself was so appealing on the business end of it, was that these are long-term projects, in many cases more than a year. And we're coming from a place where it's project after project after project. We're doing a promo for ESPN one week, a promo for HBO the next week. These things are coming in and out. It's a quantity game. It's a volume game. And once one project is over, we don't even know if there is another one after that. And we got to start thinking about the next project and the next project. The dream was always, if we can get a long-term project, if perhaps even a retainer, you know, which we always heard about from ad agencies, the Holy Grail, like these agencies, my God, they get put on a retainer for a year or even longer in some cases. Like, is that even a thing? Is that possible for us? And it took a very, very long time, but we were able to get a taste of that with technology clients who wanted to engage a team for the long haul. And that comes down to figuring out the right people on that team that can execute all the things needed for what this product is. In the case you mentioned, the Hummer, like, what does that team need to look like? And we got to have this dedicated team for a year plus. And it's kind of like building a scope around that team. Obviously, there's deliverables attached to it. We can't do more than that team can accomplish in that time. Otherwise, we have to get more people or more time. So there's definitely a science to it and an art to it, of course. But that was like the dream for us, is being able to project and predict revenue and think, my God, we can actually think more than a month ahead. Right. And put people on staff and actually build this team and make investments in infrastructure and technology where we needed to. Versus you get a project that's due in a month. It's like, okay, is that really going to build the business? It keeps the lights on and people fed for a month, but after that is a complete unknown. So, you know, as a small business owner in a design studio, I think it's something we all, you know, worry about, stress about. So having that opportunity where we can have these longer term engagements and even being able to stack more than one at a time is even better, because then they're all staggered and they're all starting and finishing at different points in time. And all of a sudden, there's a steady stream that you can actually start to grow from.
Yeah, and that helps the company just promote itself, you know, even more. Even if you can't show the work, it's just, you know, not everybody or not every specific project, there's always wait time, right, or downtime during projects. So, you know, when they're staggered and when they're, you know, we call it like, you know, when it's built like a layer cake and you have a bunch of things going on at once, there's opportunities for team members when they're waiting for, you know, client feedback or whatever it is, to create stuff for perception, to be able to throw out socials and on our socials and, you know, promote perception as a company. But to go back to, you know, as far as advice for any business owners, you know, before you'll get we get an RFP from, let's say, a GM or even these big technology clients. So you know kind of what you have to deliver. You know, you have to break it down. These things are like, I don't know, we've gotten like 85 pages. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. But the key to like really working with these big companies is making sure you get in their system before you, like, that should be the first question. Like, how long does it take to get into your system? Because we've done projects, or we've been asked to do projects with huge companies like an IBM or whatever. And they're like, yeah, we have this project. It's going to be about 8 months. So I'm like, yeah, we're in. It's cool. We already,
let's go.
Let's do it. And it's like, yeah, you just have to get into our system. 4 months. Could have done the project. You could have done the project in 4 months. Yeah. It takes forever. So if there's anybody out there that knows how to get into the system faster than, you know, I would say 2 days.
Well, one of the fast ways is just accept every term and condition they give you, which is sometimes you can't do because they're very difficult terms to stay solvent with. You know, waiting 120 days for payment, for instance. You know, you can't do that. So these things, when you push back on certain things, it just delays it. But you know, that's part of the onboarding.
Yeah, but a lot of it's on their end, because these, you know, this is another reason why these larger companies reach out to us, is because they're, you know, the way I kind of describe it is they're an aircraft carrier and we're the speedboat that's running circles around them, right? So in order for them to do anything, all right, we're going to pivot left. It's like it takes them 5 hours just to like, okay, you know, it's not going to work. They don't have the speed that we do. So You know, that's one of the reasons, I think one of the bigger reasons, not just for the outside perspective and the outside design, it's also because speed-wise, you know, they don't have to deal with a lot of red tape. They could try to get together a little, you know, discovery phase budget that they could say, all right, I have enough money in my budget. I'm going to hire Perception to come up with this idea, and then I'm going to take that and I'm going to go to the executives, and maybe if they see what I'm thinking, then they're going to be like, yes, that's awesome, bring it, and then here's a check now to pay them for the real project. So, you know, there also has to be the right people on the outside of Perception, looking for Perception, and again, just having trust in us that we're going to do good, you know, do the right job.
Yeah, I mean, the advantages of having those long-term, you know, retainers or even just a contract that lasts a year, I think that sounds really appealing to a lot of studios. But it definitely sounds, you know, and we're learning this actually the hard way now at School of Motion. We recently this year went pretty hard into doing B2B sales for teams that want to have, you know, large numbers of artists get trained. And I've run into exactly that same thing. It's like you get a yes, you send the invoice, and it takes 3 months to get in their vendor system and all that kind of stuff. You know, and so it's tricky to kind of balance those two business models and those two types of work. And in your case, you know, we're delivering the same product. It's just kind of packaged differently. But for you guys, you're actually fundamentally doing a different thing if you're delivering a title sequence versus, you know, this entire system that is for how a car interface works. And I'm curious if you see long-term still doing both of those things. I mean, there's probably things that you did 20 years ago that you just don't do anymore. Maybe you're, you know, you're not working on the, you know, the graphics package for the, you know, the comedy awards or something. But you know, do you see an advantage to maintaining the ability and the capability of doing linear motion design and this kind of new frontier?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of opportunities for us, you know, and no matter what happens and changes and innovations come with technology, I think that those are always going to be at the core of what is needed, and it's what we can bring to it. You know, for us, this dual path of science fiction and science fact has been a great story. It's not a new story. It's been around for generations, right? Science fiction has always inspired science fact. We've all heard about, you know, Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, inspiring the inventor of the submarine, and the War of the Worlds, inspiring the inventor of the rocket ship, and the Motorola flip phone being inspired by Star Trek. In 2001, there was actually an iPad in the movie, and there's so many great examples, right? So for us, that's the story we want to continue to tell. You know, getting this inspiration from the movies and the characters that we work on in science fiction, leveraging that kind of creative thinking, and how can we add value to real technology products and challenges, and how the two kind of feed nicely into each other. I think that's something that you know, still has a lot of legs, and we're really excited for, you know, what the future can bring.
I love it. So I feel like I'm contractually obligated to ask every guest this question now. So you've worked on visualizing what AI looks like, and I'm sure a lot of companies are asking for stuff like that. But internally, how does Perception feel about these AI tools, and especially the ones that are more controversial, the generative AI video generators and image generators? How do you sort of see AI playing into actually what you're creating?
Well, I mean, you know, we always have designers, you know, from day one asking us for this plugin or that tool or this, you know. I think if you need to use those specific tools to create your vision, then go for it. But we don't use AI to create our imagery, to generate, you know, like whatever ideas we have for Marvel or anything like that. You know, we might use it for inspiration, or sometimes, you know, and this could be like, yeah, this could be like, you know, the Queen's in me. I'll tell the team something, and it's probably my accent or something. Like I got marbles in my mouth, and I'll be like, you know, so the camera does this, and then it goes, and they're like, what is he talking about? Like, I don't understand it. I'm like, hold on, you know, and then I'll maybe like crank something out just to show. Yeah. But there's just so much, you know, and this goes back to what we used to do from day one of Perception, when it was just Jerry and myself, to the team today. It's like, why are you sitting at your machine? Like we used to, if creativity didn't come at like 10 o'clock when we got, you know, to the studio, from the gym or whatever it was. It's like, yo, Jeremy, man, I'm blank, man. I'm going to Jeter's Fitness. I'm getting a protein shake. I'll be back in an hour. Maybe I'll come up with some ideas. I don't know, you know? So I feel like everybody all of a sudden now it's like, hey, we got this, you know, this project, you know, everybody, let's go brainstorm. But everybody goes like right to the machine. Like what? That's why, you know, the team loves being back at the studio. It's like, all right, let's all go into the conference room. Let's throw up some paper. Oh my God, here we go. Look, it's a pen. Everybody remember how to use this.
Oh, wow.
And then, you know, let's get going. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love the smell of a, I mean, that's great.
That's good stuff, right?
You know, I love that stuff. I mean,
got
growing
the
up,
fatter
that's all I did. Oh yeah, I got the really big Sharpies, but
yeah,
but the point is that, you know, tools are tools, and some are going to advance, some are going to, you know, end up dying on the vine.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the things that we always did from the very, very beginning was go through books. We used to have a studio. Our very first studio was across the street from one of the flagship Barnes & Nobles in Manhattan. It's no longer there, of course. Like most of them, they've closed down. But we had this gigantic Barnes & Noble, and the two of us used to go in, we'd get a call for a project, and we just hit Barnes & Noble. We'd grab stacks of magazines, stacks of books. Didn't matter if it was car books, architecture books, art books, design books. Sit in the aisles. We'd have a stack 10 feet tall and just kind of go through it. We didn't even have iPhones back then, so we actually had a digital camera that was the size of a brick. And, you know, if no one was looking, we'd like take the pictures of the pages because we didn't buy all these books, but we'd get ideas like literally every page. Like, what if it was this? What if it was that? And now in the studio, we have a smaller library. We have tons of great magazines, and it's just always a great source for us to get inspiration. And I think that's a lot of what we use AI for too now, is like Danny said, you know, just typing in a vision of something, you know, a tone, a mood, of a look, and just seeing what you get out of it. It's never something we would try to pass as our own work or sell to clients, but it's just something to use as a communication device between each other when like what you're saying isn't really getting the point across, like because of Danny's marbles, for instance. But it's just a way to like okay, yeah, this is what I mean. I mean, what's the difference really between that and taking a picture out of a book or a magazine? You know, I'm not saying that's my work, but I want it to look like that. So it's just another way of doing that for us and putting together that kind of inspiration and mood of a look of something. At least so far, that's what we've used it for.
Yeah, I love that answer because, you know, my personal take is that, you know, I think what everyone's afraid of is that AI will eventually replace the I have an idea part. Right. And that's the most precious part, you know? And I think everyone who works professionally gets that at some point. It's not how good are you at Photoshop? It's not how good are you at After Effects? It's how good's the idea and how and then the ability to make that idea real. AI makes that easier. Although I'm still a little bit, I don't know, this new video model just came out like last week and it's kind of crazy. But I'm still skeptical that like AI can do everything, you know? And I like that you guys refer back to books. I remember I went and I interviewed Gunner Studio years ago, and they said something very similar. They said, you know, all the coolest stuff that you see, it's not inspired by going on Vimeo and looking at more animations. It's look at this book from the 30s I found of like old potato chip bags. You know, it's like stuff like that, you know? Yeah. Do you guys have any like favorite kind of resources for that stuff that you look at? Oh man, I used to DJ, and I still have all my vinyl. I mean, I'll start looking through like, you know, album covers. Yeah. You know, like jazz, you know, all the old jazz, like Blue Note albums, old graphic. You know, I'd be at my mother-in-law's and she'll pull out, you know, these old shopping magazines. It was like Consumers. You remember this place called Consumers? TV Guide and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, where you'd have to look through the magazine and be like, yeah, I'd like this and these batch of Hot Wheels. And then you would hand in your ticket and it would come out on a conveyor belt. It's like, oh my God, this is crazy, right? So, but she had like these old Italian ones, and like, you know, with these men with like the bell bottoms and the crazy hairs, but the graphics in it were great and the patterns and all this stuff. And me and Jeremy, we would just get inspired from anything. I remember getting a call from Showtime when we like first opened Perception. And, well, it was probably a couple years later, but it was for boxing, Showtime Boxing, and they wanted us to design, you know, whatever that match was. And we're walking around, we come up with a bunch of different designs, and I think I had a can of Altoids, and I was like, this is it. This is what we're going to sell them. we're going to sell them the Altoid can. And Jeremy's like, what are you, out of your fucking mind? What do you oh, right. Sorry.
No, you can curse on this show.
But lo and behold, when Jeremy started breaking it down and, you know, we were coming up with like the fonts and all that stuff, he came up with a whole design system based off of the Altoid can. And it was just, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I know he's going to do something. He's going to do something crazy. Yeah. And it also, you know, when the clients came, our breath was minty fresh.
For me, it's always been just going back to the heroes of graphic design. You know, when I was in college, I used to go to the library. I went to Carnegie Mellon, and they had an incredible library, and that's where I used to go for inspiration. And I would just pull out stacks of books of the greatest graphic designers, you know, in the 20th century, and just pour through them. And I also love design magazines. I used to look through Print Magazine and How Magazine, and they always had annuals, right, where they would have like the best of the best, and these annuals would be, you know, phone book size. And I just fill those things with Post-it notes. It was literally every page would be like some idea, some possibility. And, you know, when I was learning, for me, the best way I got to learn graphic design was really, I guess, copying the best, you know, and just figuring it out. Just like, let me try to do something just like, you know, Paul Rand did or Bradbury Thompson did, and make it my own. But like that's the way I kind of learned, you know, through school, was just studying the best of the best. And that's where I go. I still love looking at just classic graphic designers, annuals, that type of thing.
I think everything comes to people in different ways, right? So, you know, creativity, it comes from one, you know, from within within a person. So they're going to look at something and be inspired to do whatever that is that they're inspired to do. You know, Jeremy and I could look at the same thing, and I'm going to think something completely different than what he's thinking, as for inspiration. And that was something that I used to enjoy a lot, especially when it was just me and him, you know, cranking out all the work. And, you know, so here we are, you know, trying to get all these 150 versions for HBO, and then doing design style frames for Showtime. But we weren't allowed to let Showtime know that we were working with HBO, and vice versa. HBO would be pissed if we were telling them we were pitching for some Showtime boxing thing. Right. So it was crazy, like Coke, Pepsi. But yeah, it was, you know, I mean, inspiration comes from so many different places that I just think it's what you do with it.
I love it. You guys have been so awesome with like the stories and your time, and I really appreciate you guys coming on and doing this. I have one more question, and I always try to end with some kind of tactical advice that you know our viewers can kind of walk away with. And I think one of the things that I've heard, especially this year and last year, because it's been just financially a very tough year for a lot of artists and a lot of studios. Yep. And what I've noticed is that, you know, even the big studios have been impacted, but big studios tend to have a little bit more of a war chest and a little bit more ability to kind of flex and still get the work done. And then if you're really small, if you're 3 to 5 people, well, you can always stay pretty lean, and there's ways to get through that. But then there's this no man's land, and it seems to be around 8 to 10 people, maybe up to 20, 25 people, this like weird studio size where all of a sudden you have to start having a few layers of management and producers and stuff like that. And that's a really tricky place to be if the economy's not booming and money's not just kind of falling in your lap the way it was a few years ago. And so I'm curious if you guys have any, you know, advice that you learned over the years, because you guys grew from 2 to, I don't know how big Perception is now, but you know, I know you guys are major players in the industry. So how did you kind of navigate that? And you've been through downturns. So what did you learn? Yeah, to kind of get through that hump of small studio, tiny studio to, okay, now you're starting to become mid-sized.
No, that's a big thing with us, because we always talk about kind of the key moment in our history was figuring out that we needed to get someone in to help run the day-to-day business. You know, there comes a point in every entrepreneur's life where they have to step away and start to look at the business from the outside in rather than from the inside out. And this came from a great book called The E-Myth. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was a game changer for us. And, you know, we've gone to a lot of business conferences and we've had some consultants over the years. And one of the things that we did, I think it was right before Iron Man 2, actually, was we hired a managing director. And, you know, this was at a time where Danny and I were doing everything. We were doing the work, we were doing the sales, we were producing it. I was taking out the garbage, Danny was cleaning the toilets. Sometimes we'd reverse that role. Everything. And, you know, we couldn't get out of our own way, and everything was urgent and fires were needing to be put out every day. And at a certain point, we learned that we're never going to grow like this. We need someone here who can kind of run everything and allow us a few things. Allow us to actually get out of the office, to meet with clients, to present when necessary, to pitch when necessary, but also to give us the time and space to think and to plan and to actually look at this business and kind of come up with targets and goals and clients that we want to hit and how we might get there and strategize and things like that. So it wasn't about just like putting somebody in place so I can go to the beach. It was just, I need to like push this place away a little bit so I can focus on the bigger picture questions. Because if we don't, we're always just going to be worried about what needs to get done this week, and then the next week, and then the next week, and then a year goes by and we haven't really grown. So when we put that person in place, and we've had that role filled by different people over the years, game changer. It didn't happen overnight. It took a long time to develop the trust, especially when we've been doing it so long and it's your baby. You don't like, you're kind of like, no, don't do it that way. Do it this way. But like over time, as the trust was earned, and we're able to kind of like tiptoe out of the room, you know, carefully and quietly, we took off. Like we just grew. We started winning more work. We started going after other clients that we weren't even thinking about. And it became like an essential role. From that point forward, we always needed this managing director in place. And it gave us both confidence that, wow, I can actually leave and the place isn't going to implode. Right. Which is a feeling you have as a small business owner. Like, this place can't survive without me. And that's not healthy. It's not sustainable anyway. Right.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it was easy for us to hire, you know, designers on staff to help us because that's what we were doing. So it was like, all right, this guy or this girl's better than me at frames and animation. Like, this is a no-brainer. I'm going to bring her on the team, you know? But this managing director role was like it just unshackled us, for sure, and gave us the confidence that we needed to go and get, you know, more work, because we knew that someone was taking care of the studio. And it wasn't being run by creatives, because we knew how creatives ran it, because we were creatives and we were like, oh yeah, we got 50 grand for this project. Let's blow 62. That's awesome. Let's do it. You know, to go back to like the genesis was, you know, when we started Perception, we had a list of dream clients and Marvel was #1 on that list. And for a while, Jeremy and I couldn't update that list because we were doing the work and doing everything like Jeremy says. So when we got that person, it was like, all right, let's get back to this list and come up with a new one and hit those companies, and then come up with another one for the automotive industry. And it was just, we were just so targeted and so focused that, clients at that point, like we ended up getting like 10 within like a couple of months, because we were just planting so many seeds.
Yeah, so it sounds like the advice is, you know, you have to learn how to get out of your own way if you're the founder or the co-founder. Yeah. And is it really, you know, because I think, like you said, I mean, I remember hiring, you know, one of our first hires was a marketer. And that actually wasn't that hard to do because I had sort of learned enough about it where I felt like, okay, I think I can tell a good one from a bad one. But then when it's like, okay, I need to hire a director of finance, I don't have a clue, you know? Right. And so you have to learn how to hire people who know things you don't know. I'm curious if you have any advice about that, you know, when you're not an expert in it. What are you looking for? Are you looking for culture alignment? Are you looking for references? Is it just very kind of technical?
I think it's definitely culture alignment and references. You got to make sure that the people you're hiring have the right background and expertise and experience in what they're doing. But just to, you know, piggyback on what you just said is kind of removing the pieces of yourself that other people can do better. I like Danny, I'm a creative, I'm a designer. I'm not a producer. I'm not, you know, that guy, but I played that role. I wore that hat because I needed to. It was out of necessity. But I need a great producer so I can stop pretending to be a producer. I never was a manager of people, so a managing director was just a great person to have, like that actually can manage people and manage the day-to-day operations. The one thing that we couldn't find a substitute for, or couldn't kind of find someone that could take away from us, was the business development, was the sales. It's our company. Yeah. It's our baby. It's in our blood. No one can tell the story of perception better than the two of us. So that's something we've never hired. I mean, that's not 100% honest. We've had reps in the very long ago. We've had a couple of different salespeople many, many years ago, but nothing in the last probably 15 years or more. So the sales and the business development has been something the two of us own, because it's just, who's going to sell us better than we can? And that's one thing we learned. Whereas everything else, there's plenty of people who can design better than me, who can produce better than me, who can edit better than me, all these things. There's some amazing talent out there. But to sell your own company and to develop it, it's really hard for the owner to find someone who could do that better. I think it's impossible, but.
Yeah, definitely. And you got to find, it goes back to RGA days. I mean, we used to work with people and I had people on the team that I was a part of that were just incredible. So you got to find that right team. Because if you have the right team, everything else, it's like, it just falls into place. It's unbelievable when you have the right people in place.
Well, my brain is about to explode with the sheer amount of incredible advice and stories from the trenches that the Perception guys brought. I mean, holy cow. I really have to thank Danny and Jeremy for coming on. They built a legendary company and were incredibly generous with sharing the things that they learned over the years. The work speaks for itself, but behind the work, there's always a lot more to it when running a studio. I've learned that the hard way, and these kinds of conversations are what I wish I'd been able to hear back in my studio days. So I really hope you enjoyed this as much as I did and learned a ton. Head to experienceperception.com to check out all of the astounding work from the team, and be on the lookout for their handiwork the next time you go car shopping, because you might just get to use an interface designed by the team who did Iron Man 2, which I think is pretty cool. That's it for this episode. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss any of the amazing guests we have coming up, and leave a comment letting us know what you thought of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.